members, this is the Planning Committee for Friday the 13th of June. The first item on the agenda is the apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Ginny Priestley, Ken Richardson, Mike Chaplin, Rachel Bennett and Matt Buckler. Before I proceed though, can I just welcome Andrew back, what's left of him, and commend you for your incredible courage and cheerfulness considering what you've been through. It's been absolutely brilliant, but we're glad to see you back. The minutes of the previous meeting, the 16th of May, I've had a quick look through these and I'm happy to move them from the chair. Anybody got any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No. Can I have a seconder in that case? Seconded. All those in favour of adopting the minutes? Anyone against? No, that's carried. I have no urgent business. Public participation occurs as we go through. I haven't any interest to declare that I know of. Any other declarations of interest? No, in that case we can move on. And we're on to agenda items 6 and 7. We'll deal with them together but consecutively, if you see what I mean, which is the development of residential housing at Brooklands, Coombs Road, Bakewell. Right, you're dealing with this, I think. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. And this application, or rather these applications, are for the redevelopment of former Brooklands care home and the creation of 4 dwellings at the site, and the listed building consent and the planning permission. So here's the location plan for the development. It's off Coombs Road in Bakewell, outlined in red here. And here's an existing site plan. So the access itself comes off Coombs Road from just out of the shot here. And this is the main Brooklands care home building here. And these are the other buildings on the site, which is quite a complicated application. You'll see there's a lot of slides as we go through. But essentially, this is the care home. This is all a single site historically. These buildings are, in a lot of cases, curtilage listed in association with the main building. This is a kitchen garden area here with a wall running along. These are a range of potting sheds leaning against the north of that wall. These are some associated farm buildings with the land historically, along with piggeries and kennelling here. This is a Victorian, late Victorian dwelling, again associated with the site as ancillary dwelling, and this is a modern bungalow which from the 20th century. This is the application site plan as proposed. So the redevelopment proposals comprise returning the care home to its optimal use as a single dwelling as it was historically, and creating 3 more dwellings across the site through a combination of conversion and replacement. So they're referred to plot 1 as the main dwelling on the site, plot 2, which incorporates these buildings and these here, plot 3 to the north of that, which is a replacement dwelling here, and plot 4, which is a replacement also of the bungalow. In the case of plot 2, the potting sheds, farm buildings, kennelling and pigsties are all retained, restored and converted, with an element of new build projecting into the kitchen garden area to the south of that wall. Historically in this kitchen garden area there were a range of glass houses occupying a different footprint to this, but in that area. And as you'll see as we go through, these plans seek to nod to that heritage in its design. At the northern edge of the site, plot 3, the existing dwelling there is to be demolished and replaced with a new single-storey dwelling of a larger footprint at the north of the site there. This area that you can see circled here is historically a bleaching pool, then later an outdoor swimming pool. It's proposed to be retained as a feature, as a sunken garden. Plot 4 is the last plot on the site, which is enclosed by the line you can see around here. And that's the modern bungalow, which is completely demolished and it's replaced by a 2-storey dwelling which the lighter grey that you can see around the edges here is the ground floor, and the first floor of that takes a smaller footprint and breaks up the massing. Again, you'll see that more in the plans as we go through. Just by way of history, and because it's referred to in the application, there's an extant permission on the site for the redevelopment of a new care home. And this plan is scanned in and rather old, so you'll have to excuse it's not as legible as I would like. But you can see again here that it's orientated like the last plan. So you've got the main Brooklands building here, the current care home, and the farm buildings here, the kennels and pigsties running along here. But you'll see this rather large addition at the north of the site, and that's the elevation of that. So that's the south elevation of that. So that's an extant permission. This could be built out. That was most recently approved back in 2011. One of the main reasons to include this here is because it's of note that the Victorian dwelling at the top here was approved to be demolished as part of that scheme, and because the scheme is extant, that building could be demolished at any time, even if the rest of the scheme was not then built out.
So I've got to be clear about that.
Yes.
So it's extant. Why hasn't it? Has it been partly implemented?
It has.
Okay.
Yes. There is some demolition works on the site. The authority accepted some years ago that the permission had been implemented. So if I move on to some photos, which I think make this help with understanding of the site. So here you can see the main building, Brooklands. It's a Grade 2 listed building. The northern part is the oldest part here. There's a range of single story, which dates in some cases from the 1700s. The three-story part of the building here went on in the early to mid 1800s, with some later, albeit mostly 19th century extensions around the edges. This is a modern extension. You'll see that in some more photographs as we go through, and that is proposed for replacement on this application. This is the walled kitchen garden that I referred to. And these are the farm buildings, pigsties, kennelling. So the proposal is that these all become converted, as do the potting sheds, which you can't see in this image because they're behind that wall, with an element of new build in this area of the site here. Bethcorp at the north of the site here, that's the name of this dwelling. I don't think I've said that previously. That building would be removed and replaced by a new dwelling here, and the modern bungalow here would be replaced by a new two-storey dwelling. You can see the edge of the former swimming pool there as well, actually. You can see there's a relationship here to a neighbouring cul-de-sac estate, with some properties coming quite close to the boundary along that edge there. And this is another dwelling in separate control neighbouring the site. I should also say, as part of the proposals, there is a new earth-sheltered garage to be dug in, roughly in this position here. And the site area does actually extend down into this field, but that's for the purposes only of providing an underground package treatment plant. So this is a view approaching from the west on Coombs Road. So you can see the south elevation of the building here. You can see the land does rise behind the house to an extent, and you can see there's a good amount of tree cover there as well. And this is looking across from the showground, looking across the showground from next to the ABC. So this is the main house here in those views, and you can see parts of the walls and things running in the background there. This is the site access off Coombs Road. You can see it's quite an acute junction at the moment in one direction. And this is the main house looking from the southwest. And from the west, so this is the main entrance into the building at the moment. It would remain so under the proposals to convert it to a dwelling, albeit this would be remodelled to, the entranceway itself would be remodelled to some extent. Other changes to the main building, I should say, are relatively limited. There's elements of restoration in terms of replacement of unsympathetic windows, restoration of the historic windows. And as you'll see as we go through the slides, there's just a lot of repair work that's required as well to bring the building back into use. And this is, if I just go back again, so the next photo is off this side here. So this is the entranceway running through the site, and this is the north wing of the main dwelling. This is a more modern infill. I'll go back just again. So this is rather than being a part of the building itself, this is effectively a garden wall with the door through. And then the space behind there, this is a more modern lean-to, which is in a poor state of repair. That would be removed as part of the proposals. And the east elevation with the 20th century garden room that was added, that would be replaced by a contemporary extension as part of the proposals. That's that same extension from a different view. I should say as well that you can see there's quite a lot of external pipe work around the building as well. That would be consolidated under the proposals to return it back to a single dwelling to tidy that up as well. And this is a view from the north, and you can see some of the condition issues in this view as well, with the failing roofs and leading. There's no real changes proposed to this side other than the replacement of this modern extension. This is the bungalow you can see in the foreground here. In terms of the internals of the building, I've just taken a few photos to show you the general condition across the floors. So this is some photos of the ground floor, the first floor, and the second floor. And you can see that in places, water ingress is starting to have an effect and cause problems as well. So I'll keep referring back to this site plan just so it's clear which buildings we're looking at each point. So we'll look at these potting sheds here. So this is those looking south, and this is the rest of them looking southwest, taken from the same position. You can see their condition is poor at this time. I should note that some of these photos are taken as long ago as 2023 when the application first came in, and as a result the condition has deteriorated further in some instances. And then this is looking past the potting sheds. So here's the kennel building. This is the end of one of the farm buildings. That's the kennelling building again with the pigsty buildings next to it. And this is looking into that range of farm buildings. So this is sort of a U-shaped arrangement there. These are proposed to be restored and converted as part of the scheme. Again, you can see that the condition is quite perilous at this point. And these are curtilage listed. And then this is looking up towards Bethcar, the dwelling at the north of the site, which you can see does occupy an elevated position compared to the rest of the buildings here. This is the front elevation of that building, the rear. And you can see a view here towards the neighbouring properties and also of the former bleaching and swimming pool. And that's just a similar view, just looking a little bit further north to show the relationship to neighbouring properties there. And then finally the bungalow, which is this. So this is a 20th century edition of no historic or particular architectural interest. Moving on to the plans themselves. This is the existing south elevation, which you saw the photos of, and as proposed. So the extension from this side is replaced with something of more contemporary design, which doesn't compete with the main house and remains subordinate, and is of a higher standard of design than the existing, in our view. East elevation, this shows that change again. And you can see here the consolidation of the pipework that I mentioned as well. And the west elevation, so this is where I mentioned the entranceway changes, and you can see the glazed entranceway that I pointed out was in poor condition. You can see that behind the wall here on the existing plans. That is removed. There's one new roof light, and the doors are remodelled as well. And the north elevation, you will just notice between the existing proposed that this extension is changed. So that's the garden room again, of course. Floor plans, I won't dwell on these because they're obviously extremely detailed and hard to pick out on the site, but there's minor changes. Where you can see the darker areas is infills. In some cases, that's restoring historic plan. It doesn't take away from the historic planning in any regard across the floors. There's the existing first floor, and the proposed first floor. Some changes to subdivision, but no real increase. And the second floor, with again some minor changes to subdivision. So looking at plot 2, that's the site plan as it exists at the moment. So here's the garden wall with the potting sheds and the other range of buildings, and that's proposed. So this is the new build section here, which becomes the principal area of the dwelling, with living areas and bedrooms in it. The potting sheds, you can see that they link through from the wall, and they provide utility spaces, plant room, storage, bathrooms. And this effectively becomes ancillary accommodation to Unit 2. So you've got, again, the facilities for living here with bedrooms and living accommodation. And then you have storage across these other units here. So that's the potting sheds as they exist at the top, and as they're proposed at the bottom. You can see conversion is largely just restoration of those buildings, really. And this is the existing proposed south elevation. So this is the new build section. You're looking at the garden wall here from the south, and this is the new extension. So again, there's further photos to make this clear, because the contemporary design and the flat roofed approach makes it slightly difficult to pick out on these plans alone. But this section projects further forward than this here. But it's proposed as a red brick treatment with a lot of glazing, which reflects the historic glass houses that were on this part of the site. And then the section through. So existing and proposed from each side. So these are the potting sheds on the north of the wall. This is the proposed extension on the other side of the wall, which you can see has been set away with a link in order to avoid fixing directly onto and significantly affecting the existing historic wall. And this is the same view from the other side of the building. This is looking at the U-shaped range of farm buildings just north of that wall, existing and proposed. Again, you can see the conversion is proposed to be within the shell, and it's proposed to restore the building back to its former appearance, essentially. And this is looking at the east elevation of that U-shape. This is largely collapsed, as you saw in one of the photographs at this point, so it's proposed to rebuild and infill that. And this is the area, again, that you saw in a photo of collapsed roof, and that would just be reinstated and otherwise retained as it is. North elevation of that farm range, so west elevation rather of that farm range, again, just repair works. And the north elevation with the same, again, a window being put into that former opening. And the pigsties and the kennel buildings, again, doors instated into openings, but otherwise unchanged. And the north elevation of that same range of buildings. And the east and west elevations of the kennel building itself, which you can see a new stair is added externally to allow access to this first floor space above the former kennelling area. And this is the existing site plan now for Bethcar, for plot 3, with the Victorian dwelling here with an outbuilding to the rear. And this is a tall wall running along there. You can see again the former pool there, just for relationship. And this is the proposed dwelling. So it's largely single story. It has an undercroft with garaging and some further accommodation in the area that you can see is effectively at this end of the building here. So that's just an inset plan that I've added. And it occupies a larger footprint than the existing, of course. And the existing elevations of that building, which you saw quite clearly in the photographs, I think. And then this is the proposed southwest elevation. So it's a long single-storey building with a flat roof with solar to the roof, and I should say that's the same across all 3 of the new dwellings. They all incorporate solar and air source heating. It's a long elevation. It's faced with natural stone, and it's been designed with deep set glazing in large areas which serve to create shadow lines and break up the massing of that length. This has been reduced in scale through the course of the application, following negotiation with the applicant's agent. And this is the rear of that same building. End elevation. The front is here in this instance. and the other elevation. And that's a section through the area where the undercroft exists, so you can see its relationship to the land. So despite having this sort of second story effectively across part of it, that's earth sheltered and below the rising ground levels anyway, so it will read as a single story dwelling. And this is the bungalow on plot 4 as existing and as proposed. You can see again the red dotted line of where the footprint of the previous building. And again, you can see this line here is representing the first, so the ground floor, and this is the first floor. There's a sunken garden behind, which is cut into the rising ground, and the rest of the land here also remains within the control of that plot. Existing elevations of that bungalow and proposed. So that's from the east. This is the west. You can see there's a change in materials across the 2 floors. So it's natural stone to the bottom here, and then it has a cladding material to the first floor, which again helps to break up the massing. And as you'll see in a visualisation, which I'll put up shortly, that has a recessive appearance. This is the garage opening that you can see here from the south elevation. And that's the view from the east. Because of the rising ground, it reads as a single story building in those views. And section through as well. So these are some 3D renders provided by the applicant in support of the application. I wouldn't typically include these within a presentation, which is why I've been clear that they're illustrative only here. But I think they're helpful in terms of understanding the palette of materials and the general design approach, given the modern design approach that has been taken. So obviously this is the plot 2 extension within the kitchen garden area, and you can see that it uses a red brick that runs through and reflects the historic wall line behind. As I said on the plans, the glazing here is a nod to the glass houses on this site historically, and the openings are just treated very simply with minimal subdivision and minimal framing to just create a very clean appearance. This is plot 3, the replacement of Bethcott at the top. So here's the undercroft with the garaging, and this is where I was referencing the deep set openings within the stone walling here. And plot 4, the bungalow replacement. And this shows, I referenced earlier on that there was a new earth-sheltered garage proposed. So as the land drops down, you can see this is it from the side. So it becomes earth-covered to the rear and sides, and that the ground just runs up to it essentially. We've got no concerns about the impact of that in terms of the setting of the building or the wider site. There are some access amendments proposed as well. So this is the existing junction which you saw on those earlier photographs with quite an acute angle. It's only single width at the moment. It's proposed to widen that access, which does involve some realignment of historic walls along some of that length of that, but it allows two-way traffic to safely enter and leave the site. There's also a repositioning of some parking spaces along the roadside proposed, albeit that's outside the scope of the application. The Highway Authority have raised no objection to these proposals to make the changes. So that's what's proposed as part of the development. You'll see the recommendation is one of approval subject to matters of surface water drainage being resolved. We don't have objection to the surface water drainage. The lead local flood authority have essentially set out at the moment they're seeking more information in relation to how that would work. So that's why the recommendation today is subject to that matter still being resolved. And again, is set out in the report, there's a balance here. We accept the position of the heritage professionals, both our own and those we've consulted externally, that some harm would arise to the setting of Brooklands from the introduction of these new dwellings within the site. However, Our view is that the approach that's been taken here is the correct one. I should say this follows a refused application about 2.5 years ago, where there was a different design approach taken, and at that point there was not we hadn't received a viability appraisal to set out how much development was needed here to conserve the principal listed building, essentially. We have that now. The viability appraisal was submitted in support of the application. We've had that scrutinised by a third party, a professional consultant, and we accept the quantum of development now proposed is that's needed to return this building to its viable use and its long-term conservation. So it becomes a matter of weighing that benefit against the harm that arises to the setting of the building. The subdivision of the site from its historic use as a single site and the relationship between the outbuildings and the main house would be altered. The new buildings would have some imposition in their setting, but the design approach taken and this application is sympathetic, we believe. The single-storey, flat-roofed, contemporary approach doesn't conflict with that of the main houses, it doesn't compete with them, and it's sensitive to its wider setting. They don't serve to dominate the site. And as set out in the report, on balance, we think that the benefits of bringing this building back into its viable use as a single dwelling house and conserving the other heritage assets, curtilage listed assets on the site, outweigh the harm that would arise to the setting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've one speaker. Sorry,
do you mind if I add one other thing?
Yes. Sorry, the answer is no, sorry.
I'll just add a little tiny bit more, just following conversation with conservation officers, and it really builds on what Mark said about the balance, and sometimes we use this term enabling development to achieve the heritage benefit. And it's just, if we look at paragraph 36 in the consultation responses, you just want to point to exactly what the heritage officers have said there, because there was some concern about harm to the setting and the contribution that makes. And in discussion with them, they said they were a bit cautious about the use of the term enabling, because in historic England guidance, that only really applies if you can guarantee the heritage benefits. So they've made the point, which is at the end there, they note the importance of ensuring that the heritage benefits of enabling development are realised after an approval. So we can look at the scheme, but their concern would be that, are we going to retain the features? Will more be stripped out? Can we guarantee it? So I'm just noting the conditions there just to reflect on that. There's an archaeological monitoring condition. Is there any more we would want to say to guarantee monitoring of it from a heritage point of view, a wider building point of view? So I just said I would represent that thought. And that's just to achieve the benefits and achieve the ultimate aim of getting that overall balance correct.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that. We have one speaker who I should have mentioned earlier in the agenda, is familiar to us all as a former member of staff of this authority, and that will apply through all the agenda we have today. So can that be noted in the minutes, please? And welcome back, Sarah, when you're ready.
You'll be pleased to hear I don't intend to say very much. I'm not going to take up the full 6 minutes. I think Mark has given a run through there of all the features of the application. This has been a 6-year process of consultation with officers of the authority, both past and present. And I think what you're looking at today is the result of a very collaborative approach where officers have been open to a dialogue with the applicant, which we've been very grateful for. There has been input from officers, which we've responded to at every stage. And I think the ability of everyone to think flexibly on this one, to see the bigger picture and what we're trying to achieve in terms of finding a new use for a historic site that has otherwise fallen out of use and that is now under significant threat. And as several of you saw yesterday, the main building is increasingly becoming a focus for antisocial behaviour. In the last 2 weeks, there's been a fire set at second floor, which fortunately wasn't able to take hold, and windows have been smashed, some of which contained historic glass. So we are really at the point now that unless something comes forward on the site, it's going to continue to deteriorate quite quickly, which would be a great loss to the national park and also the communities of the national park for which this is a designated heritage asset. As Mark said, we're still consulting with the LLFA on issues of surface drainage. It's not because there's a particular problem here, it's simply because we've used the historic boundaries of the site as our application boundary. It means that the total area is over a hectare, which has triggered the involvement of the LLFA. So most of their queries actually relate to things that are taking place off-site, such as where the brook drains into the River Wye. They want detailed confirmation of that. So there's no suggestion that we can't meet their requirements or that this site is at risk of flooding. We just need to tick those boxes, and there's an ongoing dialogue there between our flood risk assessor and the LLFA. There was a question on site yesterday about biodiversity net gain. This whole application process significantly predates the statutory requirement for BNG on the site. And there obviously isn't an adopted policy in relation to requiring a set amount of BNG uplift on sites that were brought forward before the statutory requirement. If it is deemed to be a significant issue, I'm sure that there's something that can be done informally on the boundaries of the site. But what I would point to is, as Mark said, there has been a viability assessment that has been undertaken that demonstrates what is being suggested here is at the very margins of viability. So to tip it further would obviously lead to the scheme falling away. It simply wouldn't be viable to provide it. But I think some informal biodiversity gains, particularly to the north east of the site, would be possible and something that we would be willing to look at.
Okay,
So I'm not going to say any more. I'm hoping that you go with officer recommendation today, and I'm here if you've got any questions. I'll try and answer any questions you might have, because it is a very detailed application.
Thank you very much. You, by all means, stay there, yes, and we'll see how we get on. Can I just ask one or two things, just to get absolutely clear, one or two things? Somewhere in the report, it mentions the Highway Authority who's asked for some highway conditions. That I can't see that they appear in the list on page 19. Do you know what those are?
They don't, they obviously should be in that list if they aren't. They were standard conditions essentially about ensuring that the visibility and the site access is amended and completed prior to the occupation.
Right. The second one is plot 4. The structure on the top, which you said was with cladding. What is the cladding? What have we got there?
I'll defer to Sarah because I can't remember offhand.
It's a metal cladding that would be in a kind of recessive brown colour, a bit like a Corten steel, something like that.
What, like rusty?
I don't think. No, rusty. No, colour treated so that it's. I mean that visualisation gives you an idea of what would be looking at.
I can't see behind me. Yes, it's well. That's why I couldn't work out what it looks like. It looks a bit like a ship container. Okay. Well, members may have a view on that. I don't know. The next one was: is there any condition that you've mentioned on the site yesterday about what happens to this pool that was there that is going to be converted into something else? Do we need a condition relating to that?
If it's something, I mean, it's shown on the plans, but ultimately we couldn't require its retention. I don't know if that is curtilage listed, because it isn't a building.
It's a structure.
If if members wanted to retain that, then I think that would...
Well, I don't know, but I think you must advise us on whether we should want to retain it or not. But
It had some interest, and the heritage specialists welcomed its retention. We hadn't factored it in to the extent of protecting it sort of in perpetuity within the site, but there's heritage significance there, so we could retain it by condition if necessary.
Right, okay. And can I be a bit clearer about the point that Brian has just made, that that we're being asked to do? Is the advice that what we've got written down here is adequate to deal with all the problems, or are you saying something more is required?
I mean, the advice I was hearing was a bit similar, I think, to the scheme of archaeological recording monitoring, that something about the built heritage of the building, you know, that features are retained through the process of the restoration, that there's a monitoring process that goes on after permission through the works, because it was part and parcel of achieving the enabling. It wasn't just a financial consideration, it was actually achieving the heritage outcome for that building. So all those features that Mark was showing in the photos, you know, can we guarantee that those are properly protected and restored? I don't know how that would be worded, but that
we can
was a
only
monitoring styled.
We can only go on advice
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Ken,
I just wonder, Chair, whether that should be something that ought to be considered under the listed building consent application, which follows this.
well, we could try and do that, and okay.
But I think it would perhaps be appropriate to refer to it in these conditions.
Okay. Right, well, in that case, yes, I'm opening it. Sarah, do you want to say anything before I open it up generally?
Just so that as a listed building, all of those features within it are protected, and any works to those features will require listed building consent.
I think what I'm hearing is not whether they're protected or not, but whether they will be put right or not, if you see what I mean.
But that's surely the point of the listed building consent.
I think I agree with that. Right, members. We did a site visit yesterday. I'm sure those who were on the site visits must have reached some conclusion from it. Martin?
The thing which I noticed with the photographs, which come from much earlier, is just how much the site has deteriorated. And we certainly need to do something pretty fast, because it is clearly deteriorating at a very, very rapid rate.
Ken? And after Andrew, after Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think on balance, this is an appropriate development, and I welcome the proposal ultimately to restore the main building to its former glory, though it's a large family that will go and occupy it as a single dwelling. But that notwithstanding, I think that there's a number of issues that sprang to my mind. One, I think, endorsed what Martin has said about the deterioration, that others have said about the deterioration of the place over time. I think we need to take note of the viability assessment and our own assessment of that assessment, which shows it to be appropriate. I think in some respects it's unfortunate that Bethcar is going to be demolished, but as we've heard, it could be demolished this afternoon because of the extant permission. That isn't necessarily a reason for approving a scheme that sees it gone, but I think a scheme of this scale, with the objectives that it does have, it means that balance has to be achieved and that we aren't going to be able to save every last item. I think the very fact that we are seeing the retention in the main of the walled garden, and that's its relationship with the main house, can be understood. We can see the retention of the potting sheds and associated constructions, and the farm buildings that have the abattoir, the dairy, the pigsties, the kennels. All those are being retained. I think that on balance there's a significant amount of the if you like, historic development of the site is being conserved, and is understandable, even within the context of the new builds, the 3 new builds. I have some reservations, as you do, Chair, about the metal cladding.
I'm not very happy about that at all.
I do wonder if that is most appropriate in the overall, given that we've gone down the road of, I think it's plot 2, the use of brick to reflect the brick-built garden wall, and then suddenly, whilst I've no particular objection to modern architecture, it does clash for me, but that's a personal opinion. I think the sunken garden issue, or rather the what was previously a swimming pool and had an earlier use, its retention as a sunken garden is appropriate. I don't have any problems with that. My other mildly negative comment would be the amount of glazing. I can understand the glazing to reflect the previous glass houses in the enclosed garden. There's an awful lot of glazing elsewhere, and I just do worry a little bit about light pollution over time, even though we have some recessive construction. On balance, I don't think that weighs too heavily against the application. But I think I welcome as well the agent's comments about seeking some biodiversity net gain. I think that would be really appropriate and would be beneficial. I think on balance, from my perspective, Chair, I support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Andrew Hart?
Thank you, Chair. Nice to be back.
Nice to have you back.
Thank you. I think I tend to agree again with Mr. Smith. You know that. The retention of many of the features which are under threat because of the advance of time on this site, I think gives it some credit, and I think it's a reasonable compromise under the circumstances. I love walled gardens, and to respect that walled garden effect, I think reflects upon the site and many of the other features that are being retained and adapted to 21st century and reused. So I'm very much inclined to give it my support. I think it's a reasonable compromise, a worthy effort, and we've seen in the past other efforts which haven't been so worthy in other sites, and I think this reflects a bit of thought. There's a bit of work gone into this, and I respect that. So I'm inclined to give it my support.
Thank you very much. Sarah, can I just ask about this cladding? Why did we come up with that solution on that particular site?
Contemporary approach, it's easy to work with, and it's visually recessive. I think the illustration perhaps draws more attention to it than would, be the case in real life. But we can reassess that. If that's a particular problem, it's a small element of the scheme overall. We can potentially have another look at that in consultation with Mark and Brian, and potentially look at a different material, bearing in mind the viability restrictions that we're working within.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Right, Lee, and then Bill.
Just to reiterate a lot of what's already been said, really, that I think there is some good design elements to these properties, apart from that one with the metal cladding, and I think that would be quite favourable if they could re-look at those materials that are being used, because I don't really think it's in keeping with the rest of the other application as the 4 plots. I don't think that's quite as in keeping as the other 3 that's being considered here. But I would support it, but it would be nice to see some different material used on that.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, in a similar way, I think zinc metal
flat roof metal cladding just really looks awful, basically. And we don't know the results of weathering, which may make it look not better, but probably worse. And I think if that application was looked at as an individual application, it would be refused. That's my sort of thought that would happen. So on that basis, I don't know why there are lots of other solutions. I mean, the brickwork is what would fit in with the rest of the other. So I'm talking about plot 4 in particular here. So brickwork, for instance, would fit a lot better than with the rest of that building and the other buildings as well. So I can't support the application if that's part of it, unless that's looked at again. I just think it looks awful. Thank you. And just a small word about visibility displays. I mean, I'm sure they can be sorted out, but looking at the plan, the applicant doesn't own much of the access, so there might be a need to ensure that they can be achieved within the applicant's ownership. So, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. We think we're coming to a conclusion very shortly. I've raised this issue with Mark before, but I'll raise it again now. One of the things that occurred to me on site was that two of the new houses, the one we've just been talking about and the replacement house at the top of the hill, are standing very close to a lot of very mature and very fine trees. And they're quite close, and they're on the south side of both houses. And I'm asking that they be seriously looked at for tree preservation orders, because they're not protected in practical terms in any other way at the moment. Mark will suggest to you some conditions, but those can only be holding conditions. They can't have the impact of a tree preservation order. I'm told that they need to be looked at to judge their state of health and so on, which is fair enough. But in any decision that we pass, I would be grateful if we could add in that the protection of those trees be given a serious look at. Subject to that, Kath, do you want something? And then I'm going to wind up and ask somebody to propose.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've paid particular interest in what the Town Council says, because this is where the building is actually, in Bakewell. And I wonder if you feel that all the issues they raised have been adequately addressed. Thank you.
Well, the one that they haven't addressed for very obvious reasons is the Section 106 affordable issue. And that's just out of affordability.
Yeah, that's right. And in other regards, they've referred to the retention of Bethcar, which is the dwelling at the top of the hill on plot 3. That was something else they wanted to see. But for the reasons set out in the report, we don't feel that can be achieved either.
Right. Now, we're not quite being asked on the report as it stands to approve it in its entirety today, because it's subject to the discussions over drainage. So what we're effectively doing is advising our officers of our view so that they can go ahead and make the approval. So I wonder whether we could proceed on the basis that we approve this in principle, and subject to the drainage issues and so forth, subject to the highway conditions, subject to officers talking again to the applicant over the cladding and whether there are other choices, and subject to the officers giving proper consideration to tree protection. That would seem to me to be where we're heading for from this conversation. On that basis, would somebody like to move that we proceed? Ken? Martin seconded. Oh, well, whoever seconded, the two seconders. On that basis, all those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Sarah.
Do you abstain?
Who abstained? Oh, you abstained. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It wasn't unanimous. One abstention.
Sorry, Chair, you've got two applications here.
Okay.
Listed building.
Now, we've still got to go through to the listed building application. Is there anything in this report about the listed building that we need to have consideration to that we haven't given any consideration to so far?
There's nothing that we haven't already discussed, Chair, no.
So I can put that straight to the vote, can I?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you. Just going back to the issues about, if you like, the architectural monitoring and recording, I just wonder whether the proposed item 3 in the conditions, if that was made to be a scheme of archaeological and architectural recording and monitoring, then that, I think that would cover the monitoring element that, and any recording that might be needed as a result of this, if this is approved and goes ahead.
We can do that, can't we? Yes. Are members happy with that? Yes. Okay. Well, have you got that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we're on to page 41, agenda item 7. This is the listed building application. The conditions are set down on pages 42 and 43. Can I have a mover and seconder?
With that minor amendment.
Yeah. And that's all those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried unanimously this time. And now we're going to move on to page 55, agenda item 8, Thatcher's Cottage, Hollinsclough. Right. You're dealing with this again, Mark.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This application is for the extension of a dwelling, and it's a two-bed dwelling located west of Hollinsclough. You can see from the site location plan here that the site's within open countryside, and the dwelling, of course, is within the red line area, and the additional land in blue is in the applicant's control as well. So this here is an agricultural building approved by the authority in around 2000. And there you go, here's a site plan showing that more clearly. So here's the dwelling house, and there's an existing outbuilding and metal container on the site here. That's the agricultural building that I mentioned already. So this is and this is the front of the elevation of the dwelling here. And that's as proposed. So if I flick between the two, you can see that the intention is to remove both the container and the existing outbuilding to the front of the house, and to extend to the side and to the rear. So here's some photos in front of the house. Obviously the small wooden lean-to you can see to the side there would be removed and replaced as part of the proposals. Side and rear, and the other side. That's the small outbuilding in front of the house. So these are existing floor plans. It's a two-bedroom property, living accommodation at ground floor, and as proposed. So it comes out to the side, a two-storey, then a two-storey gable comes off that. And then there's a lean-to as well, which is in the corner between the rear of the existing house and that rear projecting gable that's proposed. And existing elevations and proposed. So all of this here is new, as is this. And then on the side, you can see the extent of rearward projection of the proposed extensions. So you'll have seen in your reports that this application is recommended for refusal. The property is an affordable dwelling. It's secured as such by a legal agreement, which was put in place when the property was first rebuilt. There was formerly a barn, and it was rebuilt as an affordable dwelling. And at that time, a restriction was put in place to retain it as an affordable dwelling. The size of the building as it stands at the moment is roughly 64 square metres. As proposed, it would be just over 146 square metres. The upper threshold for 5-person affordable dwellings set out by our policies is 97 square metres. So we're almost 50 metres above that as proposed here. So that would take the property out of affordability in the terms that the authority set those out. So that's the first and the principal reason for refusal. In addition, the scale of development relative to the size of the house, in our view, is too great, and it overwhelms the existing dwelling and dominates it. And that's the second reason that the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We have two speakers. The first one I have, I hope I've got them in the right order. The first one I have is Hannah Gordon.
Thank you. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself and my fiancé Martin, who was born and bred in Hollinsclough, as was his father, grandfather and great-grandfather before him. We understand the reason our plans have been recommended for refusal is due to the local dwelling condition attached to Thatchers, that the size of our proposed alterations would make it unaffordable to local people and harm the character of the existing property. Based on our research, Thatchers is not the type of site which would normally have a local dwelling condition attached to it. It's a standalone cottage with land and an agricultural building. It's not in a village, it's not on a bus route, it's 3 miles from a shop. And speaking from experience, it's an incredibly isolated place to live, no more so than when it snows and we get cut off for days on end. In addition to this, it's already unaffordable. We've had the property valued by Graham Watkins Chartered Surveyors at £425,000, and that's with the local dwelling condition in place. If we hadn't been so fortunate to have inherited the property from Martin's late father, we'd have never been able to buy it. It's near impossible as young people to afford to live in the Peak Park or any rural area, forcing more and more young people out of rural communities. We would like nothing more than to be able to raise a family in the Peak Park, an area where we're so fortunate to live. Nearly every house that comes up for sale in our surrounding area is purchased as an investment opportunity, a second home, or turned into a holiday cottage. We don't want to do this. We just want to turn Thatchers into a viable family home where we can raise kids and send them to the local school. We just want to create a 3-bedroom family home with a kitchen table the kids can do the homework around and a utility room for muddy wellies and hosing off the dog, and probably also the kids having spent a day during the Peak District. The planned alterations are only to create what is nowadays a normal family home. We don't want to create some grand designs monster of glass. We just want a house that looks normal and is in keeping with the local area. Whilst our plans are in excess of the 97 square metres, this is due to working around the existing site. If we were building from scratch, it would be easy to get 3 bedrooms and the living space we're looking for within that, but we're trying to minimise the changes to the existing building as much as possible, letting it remain traditional and unchanged with no walls being taken out or the windows the same. The wraparound and step-down nature is also to minimise the impact, as it allows Thatchers to remain the most prominent part of the building and tucking most of the alterations into the bankside, hidden from the road, and also limiting the impact from Crome Hill as much as possible. Our agent has spent a lot of time digging into the history of the property and the conditions attached. Whilst the 106 condition was added as part of a retrospective planning application when the building was erected from scratch, it was never a conversion. And whilst it does have a local dwelling restriction on it, the version which was added does not specify any limit on floor space or value like the modern version does. It only requires that those living there are local people, and that's what we are. We have no intentions of ever leaving and would love to grow old here and pass it down to our own kids one day. Thatchers is of massive sentimental value to us. It's the house where Martin's family pets are buried, it's the house where he watched his father pass away, and in more happy memories, it's the house where we're getting married next year. We'd absolutely hate to be driven out of the area due to our need for a larger family home. As we understand it, these conditions and restrictions are put in place to encourage young people and local people to stay in the area. We're exactly those types of people, so we really hope this council will support our plans to allow us to stay in an area which we love.
Thank you very much. And the second speaker I've got is Councillor Richard Slack.
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you have presses?
No, it seems to be on, so you're all right.
Yes, a lot of what I've got to say is quite a lot of repeating, so do you want me to cut them bits out, or...?
We don't like too much repetition, but we'll leave it to you to make as there are only two speakers.
Committee members, with respect, the council believes it is morally right to approve this application, that on account it is sorry about this, with Peak Park policies and does it meet the criteria. Just trying to skip out the bits that...
Please just read it as you want to read it. So long as you keep within the 3 minutes, we'll be happy.
Martin Grindy is a very respectable member of the community and has no part in the historic development of the Thatchers, which has totally been rebuilt from scratch using the materials of the old barn. He was born and raised in Thatchers and attended the school in Hollisclough, and along with generations of blood relatives of the Grindy family over time. Martin inherited Thatchers from his father, Jim Grindy, who passed away when Martin was only in his teens, and has lived there always ever since. In recent years, Martin and his partner has joined him. The couple are very open about their desire to start a family, which I'll skip that bit. Hollisclough is a dispersed parish, and the village has only 9 dwellings, with only 10 people on the electoral roll, with only 117 electorates in the whole of the parish, with dwellings very rarely coming on the market. Examples of a 2 up, 2 down derelict dwelling making 230,000, and there's family homes coming on for sale between 800,000 and 1.75 million. Local needs are limited. Thatchers, with its extension, would become integrated with existing properties threads. Grattan's Farm, Stone Lodge, Rakehead, it would not be out of scale with them. It would not extend beyond its curtilage, and it would consolidate a thread already there. Panorama Planning has disentangled the historic planning of Thatcher's Cottage and has addressed each policy of concern with clarity. It has recognised the restriction on occupancy 2001 planning approval. It has recognised that the SO1 agreement obligations have been adhered to. It has recognised that there are no restrictions placed with regards to extensions. It knows that under current Peak Park policy it would not have been characterised as a local needs dwelling, and that it would be referred to as a more affordable dwelling. It is not restricted in the same way as a more recent needs home.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Would you like any questions?
No, you by all means resume your seat, and if we need to ask any further questions, we'll
Thank you.
We'll do that. Thank you. Right, members, we did a site visit yesterday. So, Ken?
Thank you, Chair. Seems to me we're between a customary rock and a hard place. I'd like a bit more background, I think perhaps from officers. The section 106 is restricting occupation to local persons. As we've heard, we're dealing with local persons. And there does seem to be this disjuncture between, on the one hand, our quite legitimate policies requiring the retention, quite rightly, of affordable buildings for local people, and now we have local people wanting to expand. It's the old issue of, regardless of whether it's a rebuild or whatever, of this issue about enabling people to progress. I understand, and I have no particular problem with what does appear to be an excessive extension and the way it dominates the existing building. I don't think those are appropriate, and I would have preferred something more retaining the original, as it is, structure. But I'm, as you can tell, Chair, and as other members will, I'm flailing on this one. It does seem to be a problem, but perhaps a bit more about the Section 106 and its application. I would like to hear.
Okay, I'll ask one or two other members to speak first and then come back to that. Andrew Hart.
Chair, I'm uncomfortable. Again, we try to keep the viability of villages and our protected places. And we've got an application here with local people wanting to retain their local connection and come, live back in the house that's been in the family for a generation or more. I very much agreeing with Ken about examining this section 106 and what the exact reason for doing it at the time and what implications that there are. But I feel that policy doesn't allow us to perhaps help people to reoccupy places that have been in the family for a while. And also the question is why the reason for the extension, I think, was explained by the lady. It's a matter of keeping in with the existing building and not knocking around the existing building too much. Like perhaps Brian to sort of explain what they feel about, the officers feel about that, rather than relying just on the square meterage. Do they agree with the applicant in their way that they have dealt with the application?
Okay, thank you. Kath, and then I'll ask the officers to comment.
Well, I think everybody knows my stance on converted barns by now. I've been on the authority almost 30 years and I've bought them ever since. So, but our young people are the lifeblood of this national park. They're the ones, I'm in my 80s, I'll be gone soon, but they're the ones who are going to take over and look after this beautiful national park. And we should do everything, I think, possible to encourage them to stay and to look after them. Obviously, people want children. They've got to have accommodation suitable to that. So I cannot support refusal of this application. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Bill to just comment first, and then I'll get back to you. Bill.
Yes, thank you. I think the applicants are sort of got a legitimate, are making legitimate requests because they have a local need. They are local needs, family with a long generations coming from the village, and it seems to be what they're trying to do is organically develop that site to meet continuing local need. And the alternative would be for them to move somewhere which they either couldn't afford or a long way away, which would seem to undermine the spirit of the policy. So I think the spirit of the policy, I don't think is affected, and presumably in any consent, and that local needs condition could be retained. I didn't go to the site, so I don't want to comment too much on how it looks, but I think in principle, it's important, as Kath just said, that local people, local families are supported wherever we can, and I don't think it undermines the policy in that way. I know what the arguments are about the size, and it no longer be, but that is their need, and they are local. So in a sense, I don't think it undermines the policy. So I support it for that basis. But I'm interested to hear about the design, because I didn't go. So that's another issue. But it seems reasonable to me.
Okay, right. Who's talking to us?
Mark's going to say about the
design
and the floor space.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll touch briefly on the policy. I'm sure Brian would want to add to that. So we have to determine applications against our current policies, of course. In the first instance, that's the starting point. And it's important to note that those policies in relation to affordable housing seek to retain it in perpetuity. So what we're looking at is an application for a local person, but for a local person. So if it is approved at this size, my view is that you would have to remove the restriction on the occupancy, because it isn't serving a planning purpose at that point. The planning purpose is that it remains affordable in perpetuity. It will not remain affordable if it becomes this size. The section 106 Watts, it's an older one, in combination with the condition which is on the permission, which restricts the extension. So we've got a condition that restricts extension, which allows us to keep it within our current floor space guidelines, and we have a section 106 which restricts the occupation to local people. Those two together mean that it complies with our current policies up to 97 square metres. Once you get beyond that, we're not retaining it in perpetuity as an affordable dwelling if we just approve it for the needs of one person at a larger size, because as I say, those restrictions would fall away, or would need to fall away. We couldn't reasonably maintain that section 106 in my view. In terms of the Andrew's query around the use of the floor space, it's a typical form of development. It's a simple rectangular building. It could be extended either to the side at 2 stories or to the rear at 2 stories to give two additional rooms of 3 metres by 5 metres. You'd still be within the floor space guidelines at that, or a little bit more. I don't see that as being prohibitive to creating a dwelling. It would require more internal alteration for them to do that, just given where the rooms currently exist. But as I say, I don't think that's preventative to a 97 square metre dwelling being achieved here. I'll let Brian add to that on the policy front if he wants to.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so, I mean, this type of property with a Section 106 agreement on is already classed as a more affordable home. You would recognise that they are susceptible to market values in this situation. The only ones that are really controlled for very, very affordable homes are within the social housing sector. It's not in that. So it's already in that more affordable bracket. This would take it in further away from being affordable. And as Mark said, actually, you kind of reach a point where the purpose of the planning agreement fails. You know, you'd probably have to take that away, which is significant loss of the purpose of that building. Interesting point that the councillor mentioned about it being a dispersed parish. There's lots of areas like that in the Staffordshire Moorlands, and we do, you know, try to find opportunities for people to reside and stay in the area, not just in the villages. Hollinsclough is a tiny place, and actually this is part of the community. We have the same issues in Flash, Guamford, and other areas which are dispersed. You can't just supply in these very small hamlets. These are still opportunities for people. So it would be classed as a loss. I think, as well as Mark said, you know, policy does have some flexibility in it to allow for an increase up to that maximum range, which would be 97 square metres. We could, by looking at the design, be a bit flexible with that to try and achieve something that's, you know, as close as possible to that. But that's as far as I think we can go beyond it breaking that policy principle. So policy is trying to strike that balance, isn't it, of design and retaining properties for a community purpose. And what we've said, in both in design and principle for public benefit purposes, it goes beyond that. So I think if members are inclined to approve it as it is, it certainly, we lose something from our intention of the planning policies, and probably one I would look to refer back, because it's a significant loss of one of those planning aims.
You get a sort of situation, don't you, where if this was the same building in the same circumstances in a village, I don't know, the size of Tidesville, you would be able to say that these young people would probably be able to find something that meets their needs somewhere in that parish. But actually, with an area like Hollinsclough, once you say to them, you can't have this, then the likelihood of them being able to provide or find anything else in the parish which would support a larger family is going to be pretty slim. It's a difficult issue. It is a sort of balancing act. Is there a halfway house in this, as a matter of interest, of replacing the local occupancy condition with a prime residence condition? To say that if one was to approve this as it is presented to us, then we can keep it for local residents rather than holiday makers or whatever, second homes.
We have no policy basis for that.
That's a shame. Right, Ken.
Chair, I wonder in the circumstances whether we might consider deferring this and offering it back to, in order to try to maintain the presence of a local family and enable them to expand, but at the same time recognising that there are restrictions through the Section 106 and the rest, and that the scale of development is disproportionate to the primary dwelling, whether it should be referred back to see whether there are, as Brian I think has suggested, there may be options to enable development to meet some, perhaps not all, of the requirements of the applicant, but also to meet the requirements that we have for the Section 106, effectively to reduce the scale of the development, to reduce the impact on the property, on the primary property, and whether that has any legs, Chair.
Are you moving then?
I can do if you so wish, but I'd like to get some feedback as to whether that's an appropriate way forward, perhaps from officers.
I think we'd need some clarity as to how far members are intending that to go. Obviously, from our point of view, 97 square metres is what we would want to see an amended extension reduced to in order to comply with the policy, for the reasons Brian set out. So if you're asking us to go away and work with the applicant to try and achieve something within that footprint, that's obviously something we can easily do. Whether it's achievable or not, from the applicant's point of view, would be for them to determine. If it's outside of that, then I think it's more difficult, but obviously we could do that and bring it back to this committee for their consideration.
I think that's what I had in mind, Chair, to get as close as possible to that 97 square metres, to try to meet the requirements of both sides in this instance.
It'll never be perfect. No. Andrew?
Yeah. Isn't there a 10% leeway? Did we do that previously?
Say that again?
10% leeway, where it might be 97 plus another 9.
The policy position on that is that for dwellings that are smaller than 97 square metres, we will allow extensions of up to 10% or up to the 97. So 97 remains the upper threshold in policy terms.
So, having heard that answer, are you making a proposal?
Along those lines, yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded? That is that we go and have further chats to see whether we can get nearer. Is that seconded? Okay. Do you want to talk? No. Just seconding. That's okay.
Can you just repeat that?
Well, there are two or three arguments in this, but one of them is that the extensions proposed are excessive in themselves in relation to the size of the existing house. Secondly, that there may be a perfectly valid argument for saying we could go a bit bigger in size to try and accommodate and keep this house available for young people in the area, but it needs some further discussion to see how we can reconcile those things. Is my understanding of the discussion. So that's proposed and seconded. I don't take contributions from the floor, I'm afraid. No, okay. That is proposed and seconded as far as it's gone. Okay, all those in favour of the proposal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anyone against? 1. No abstentions? No, that's right. So that is carried and it goes back to you to have a go at. And it'll come back to us if you can't get any further. Right, the next item I have on the... Do members want a break? We've only got one substantive item left on the agenda. Do members want a break? No? In that case, we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the Shepherd's Hut at Hollinsclough. And you're going to deal with it, John. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this application seeks retrospective planning permission for the change of use of land to allow the siting of a shepherd's hut and surfaced access track at land to the southeast of the Glen, Hollinsclough Rake. The application has been referred to committee as the Parish Council supports development, contrary to officer recommendation of refusal. So the first slide that you can see shows the site location plan. The site is located in open countryside approximately 1 kilometre to the northwest of Holmesclough. The hut is sited on land within the ownership of the Glen, a property located approximately 220 metres to the northwest on the opposite side of Holmesclough Rake. Actually, let's go back. So the property that belongs to is just up here at the top, right top corner there. So this is the block plan. The hut is here. If I just hold it there, and then to the rear, you've got the ruins of a former field barn. Okay, so next couple of slides show the site entrance from Holmesclough Rake with the serviced track leading down to the Shepherd's Hut. Now this slide shows the approach to the site from the northwest. Along Holmesclough Rake, the Shepherd's Hut is to the left of this picture, so you can't actually see here because it's screened from the road by the stone wall. However, if you come from the southeast, it's much more visible. It's now the opposite direction. Coming up the road, you see the Shepherd's Hut just here. This is a close-up view of the site. You can see the separate small timber structure containing a composting toilet located adjacent to the hut. Just here, obviously the hut's there. The ruins of the former field barn are here. And then another close view of the hut itself. You've got a metal and timber platform with steps erected to the front. And now we have a view from the public footpath that intersects the site. And then this is an aerial view, so you can see in blue, the dashed blue line, that's the public footpath coming across. This is the hut here, the access track, and the former field barn. And yeah, there's the termination of the footpath. And then this is another view of the public footpath, again, a bit lower down from the valley looking up. Again, very clearly visible, with very limited, well, no screening to the front of the barn, to the Shepherd's Hut, sorry. And then finally, a view from the opposite side of the valley, again taken from the public footpath, which extends all the way to the site as I've just shown. So you can see the path coming across, and there's the hut there. So, okay, let's leave that there. So I'll just briefly recap why officers are recommending the application of refusal. There are two reasons given. The first is that the siting of a Shepherd's Hut in a national park is contrary to policy RT3, though such a structure may be allowed in limited circumstances. Limited exceptions apply. So one such exception is if a single hut must be located close to the facilities of a farmstead. However, as you can see from the photos, this hut is not close to an existing farmstead, and so officers consider this exception does not apply. Policy DME2 relates to farm diversification, and this policy is clear that Shepherd's Huts are only supported by policy in cases where they are supporting an existing agricultural business. In this case, there is no evidence of an agricultural business operating which needs the support, which needs the income generated from the Shepherd's Huts, and so again it's considered that this exception does not apply. The development is therefore considered unacceptable in principle. Secondly, the development, as you can see, is in an isolated location away from existing building groups and is highly visible, including from a public footpath within an open landscape. The development causes significant visual harm to the landscape, its character and the wider scenic beauty of the national park. The development does not conserve or enhance the valued landscape character of an open countryside setting of the site. The application is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons given on page 64 of your agenda reports pack. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. We have one speaker, and it's Leanne Sharrett.
Good morning, committee members. I understand the application has been recommended for refusal due to concerns around landscape impact and not being farm diversity. The hut is small and is made of untreated natural wood, ensuring it harmonises with the landscape. The roof consists of metal sheets to replace the roof of the old barn. replicate the roof of the old barn. It is off-grid, utilising composting toilet and lacking modern amenities such as television, shower. There's no Wi-Fi, phone reception, and it does not have a log burner. There are no fire pits allowed or barbecues. With reference to visual harm to the landscape, people utilising the public footpath will comment on how lovely the hut is. I've never received a comment stating I am ruining the visual character of the landscape, and the hut has been in positioned so that it does not skyline. The original gate was repositioned to allow safe passage for farm machinery. In wet weather, the tractor would churn up the ground taking wood onto the highway. Therefore, a short track was installed to allow machinery access off the field safely. By repositioning the gate further back into the field, this has additionally provided a pull-in area for road users, which was frequently utilised. In an effort to improve environmental sustainability, 11 silver birch trees have been planted along the boundary fence. In total, we have planted approximately 60 trees on the ground at present, with 50 metres of natural hedgerow supporting biodiversity. We are invested in improving the land by not using chemicals and allowing the fields to be meadows. I'm not quite sure why the case officer thinks we are not involved in farming. We actively maintain agricultural activities on our land. We have a holding number and have historically reared livestock and intend to continue when circumstances allow. We have pigs for land management. We do farm the land, and our agricultural enterprise produces high quality meadow hay, free from pesticides, benefiting local wildlife. We are committed to eco-friendly farming, only mowing once a year. Around 3 acres of ground are left completely untouched for natural biodiversity, and we do not receive any government grants. The Shepherd's Hut serves as low-impact rural tourism aligned with the Peak District National Park principles. We all know the massive impact that holiday lets and second homes have had and continue to have on local housing supply. This hut is a way of allowing people to visit the national park without negatively impacting communities by taking up housing. My partner's family are lifelong community members around 7 generations. We are lucky enough to call this home and hope that our children and future generations can remain in the area. My family and I take great pride in preserving the integrity of the land, and we hope to continue to contribute positively to the environment and local economy. We are active members of the community. My partner is self-employed as a local dry stone waller. He's also a retained firefighter at Longley Station, and he assists the council in winter clearing the roads with the tractor and plough. The hut has been supported by local people in the parish council, and there have been no objections despite it being in situ for 6 years. I respectfully ask the committee to allow the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we did a site visit yesterday. Any members on the site visit got a view on this? Please.
While the facility is masked from the east, it's in wide open landscape from the west, and that really does concern me. I mean, the one thing we haven't heard is, for me, it's a combination of both the presence of the hut and the tarmac road down to it. And whilst I acknowledge the applicant's comment that creating a hard standing at the top of the slope helps reduce the amount of debris that might be carted onto the road, that access track of itself is an intrusion in the landscape. The combination for me of the height of the facility and that tarmac, it really, I mean, this slide illustrates in part the extent that it's visible across the landscape. If this had come to us as an application for provision of this facility, I feel sure that the recommendation would have been for refusal. And albeit it's been there for 6 years, I don't see a justification for continuing it, Chair.
Is that period right, 6 years? I see that's when the enforcement file was opened, but how long has it been there?
I think it's 5.5. It's approaching 6. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Bill?
I think the policy is not against having appropriate developments like this in the park, but it seeks to prevent a sort of a spread of random developments like this all over the park, which if there wasn't a policy, that would happen. And that would be very undesirable for all concerned with the park, local residents and visitors alike. So this seems to fail on all counts, really, on all policy counts.
Can I ask, have there been any discussion with the applicant over alternative sites which would closer fit the policy?
Not that I'm aware. Ultimately, this came forward as an enforcement case. The landscape is very open here. It says about 130 metres from the main house. Whether that could be considered as part of a pre-application, but for this site, it was considered to be unacceptable. That's been presented to the applicants quite clearly. Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing the way this discussion is going, and I think we should discuss that with the applicant and see whether there's some alternatives. Have I got a proposer and seconder? You're proposing refusal on the ground set out in the report. That's seconded by Martin. All those in favour? Anyone against? Those abstaining? 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we have a fairly strict policy on this, and we're going to have to see what other options are available for you to see whether something else might be made to work. But I think the decision is clear that we have a policy, and we don't want to have these little huts springing up all over the countryside. Kath?
Yes, Chair. I'm just wondering, after that Birchover application, which we refused on a hillside, if that has any implications for this. I mean, it might not, but it might have.
Funnily enough, I made a note to that effect on my agenda when I was reading the report, but actually that was not about shepherd's huts. That was about small wooden structures, which.
Thank you. It's just that I wanted to make sure in my own mind.
Okay, then move on, please, to the last item on the agenda, which is agenda item 10, page 73. For those of you who've got paper copies. I think it's the shortest version of this report I've seen in a great many years. I think everything's slowing down, isn't it? Have you anything to add to it? No? Okay. Shall I move that we... Bill?
Steel container and timber building at Cornfield Barn, Lyme Hanley. Just a brief word on that. We visited that site, and I remember, and this is just an observation, that the applicant who was there was said they were quite happy to remove those structures when we're on site, which that has no legal status, obviously, but it's interesting that they're now appealing against enforcement on that. And just so that when people say things, that is just, they just say things. That's my observation on that. And that was definitely not their feeling they portrayed when we're on site. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I move that this report be noted. Is that seconded? Thank you. All those in favour of noting it? Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. That brings the meeting to a conclusion. Thank you very much, members. And I think it's probably the shortest planning committee that I have attended.